Hello folks, I am David Kramar, Precision Agriculture Specialist with the Carrington Research Extension Center and North Dakota State University Extension. The presentation I'm going to give today is on data discovery and precision agriculture, and this is a topic I find pretty interesting. If you know where to look, there's a plethora of free information out there available at our fingertips, and there's a lot of software that's free. There's other software that costs money as well, but there's a lot that we can do with just really inexpensive and free data if we know where to look. So let's start out with what is data discovery. Without question, precision agriculture is largely driven by data. And as the technology gets better, we're going to find that more and more of what we're facing are issues with how we deal with this data. The Internet of Things, for example, has resulted in sensors in fields. And these data that we acquire are going to exist in the form of spatial or location-based data, as well as non-spatial data sets, and then of course a mix of data from the Internet of Things or IoT. Some of this information is free for public consumption, and other data must be collected by the individual. So for the purpose of this talk, we're going to define data discovery as the process of obtaining actionable information by finding patterns or uses in data from multiple sources. It's a term used to express a mode of analysis in which users attempt to gain a holistic view of the available data sources. And really what we're going to focus on today are just a few different places that you can find data or create data that will allow you to start bringing together all of that information associated with your agricultural field. So what is data discovery in precision agriculture? Well, it's somewhat of a loaded topic. We can think about it in the context of the delineation of field boundaries based on aerial imagery. We can think about it as including or the inclusion of soils data, rotational crop data, treatment data, topography, land use, water features, so forth and so on. And there's a number of open source as well as commercial software packages that allow us to explore these available data sets. One of the most common open source software packages is QGIS. That's this particular icon right here. The most common commercial application is ArcGIS. That's this one right here. And then we have Orfeo Toolbox, which is a free set of remote sensing tools that allow us to process imagery. Bilco, which is an open source remote sensing platform that was developed by UNESCO. And then Google Earth, which is not really a GIS, but really does offer a good way to create KML files that can store tabular information and calculate perimeters and areas. These are examples. The reality is that with the exception of some common data needs, an individual's unique data needs are going to vary. And this is really the discovery part of data discovery. It's up to the individual to determine what information they need, even though there are common data needs that exist amongst all of these processes. So what data are useful and where can we get it? Well, one of the first places to stop or to check out would be the USDA Geospatial Data Gateway. Many of you may be familiar with this, some of you may not be familiar with this, and that's okay. The Geospatial Data Gateway is kind of a one-stop shop that we can get SURGO data or county level soil survey data, topography information, land cover information, in some cases imagery from the National Agricultural Imagery Program, NAEP. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the talk as well. Water features, we can get climate averages and precipitation averages as well. This is pretty straightforward. It's very easy to go in, identify a location via the map, and download data for that specific location. Within the USDA Geospatial Data Gateway, you can look at the available map layers for your selected area of interest. In the previous slide, I selected the area around Carrington, North Dakota. There's US Public Land Survey sections, climate precipitation, PRISM data, climate temperature, elevation derivatives, geographic names or places, not probably terribly useful. as well as hydrologic units, so your watershed boundaries, land use, land cover, cropland data layer by state, as well as soils that I was mentioning, the SURGO data by state or conterminous US. And while I recognize that much of the SURGO data is probably too coarse for in-depth applications, it does represent a good place to start and to give you a general idea of what you have going on in your area. Once you've selected your data sets, you can select the format, Esri shapefile or the Esri file geodatabase. My suggestion is, if you are not overly savvy with geospatial applications, to go ahead and get the Esri shape format. It's a little bit more difficult to handle, but it is an open source type of format now, and so it works across platforms. Once you've decided on the file format, you'll basically hit continue. It'll prompt you for an email address, and then it'll email you a link where you can download those data sets. So where do we start, and how do we organize the data that we're going to get? Well, arguably, we need to know the bounds within which we are operating, and there's a number of ways to obtain or generate field boundary data. More often than not, we have to create it based off of either aerial, satellite, or UAS imagery. And that opens up a couple of options. We have Google Earth, we have QGIS, we have ArcGIS, there's a few other packages out there. KML is Google's native format, and it does have the ability to store the spatial representation of the field, the geometry, if you will, as well as the tabular or non-spatial information. Shapefiles in this day and age are considered open source. That means that they can be used across platforms, so you're not restricted to a commercial type application. You can use open source. Geodatabases, on the other hand, tend to be more platform specific. In Google Earth, if we wanted to create a polygon boundary, we just simply create a new polygon, digitize in the boundary, and then the description tab allows us to store information about treatments, amounts, yields, crop type, etc. The style color just allows us to change the appearance. And then the measurements tab, which I have shown here, calculates the area and the perimeter. One of the nice things about Google Earth is it's free. The imagery is updated fairly frequently. And so while you might not be able to get imagery from last week, you do get updated imagery rather frequently in it. And it gives you the date right down here. This says 2017. Other areas are more up to date. Nonetheless, it does give you a good place to start. All right, QGIS. QGIS is an open source GIS package. It's been around for quite some time. Not as intuitive as Google Earth per se, but quite a bit more robust. Within QGIS, we have the ability to create shapefiles, as I've done in here, digitized the whole field. Normally what you would do is go in and digitize individual plots. And within this, we can store attribute information about the field. So the year of first planting, the crop type, the yields, so forth and so on, not dissimilar from Google Earth. Attributes in QGIS are stored a little bit differently. They're stored in an attribute table. So in this particular example, I've created one feature, and then I have a field called treatment, crop type, yield, and we could continue to add on to this as we gain more and more information. And the nice thing about GIS is that we can then use these areas and extract and analyze information per polygon. Another nice thing, as I've noted, is that QGIS is a free and open source software application. ArcGIS is arguably the largest commercially available GIS software out there. Similar to QGIS, the attribute tables allow us to store information about crop type, disease, yields, prescriptions, treatments, so forth. And we can extract and analyze information per polygon again. This is, in fact, a commercial software package. So unless you're affiliated with in an organization that has these licensing, this can get a little bit expensive. Orfeo Toolbox is really more of a suite of tools used in processing remotely sensed data. It is extremely powerful, and it includes both a mapping component and a toolbox component. It's a little bit less intuitive, but it is free. And you'll notice here I have this blue area here is radiometric indices, and this opens up a tool that allows us to come in and calculate a number of different vegetation indexes, assuming we have the data available. NAPE imagery, that's imagery from the National Agricultural Imagery Program, has a near infrared band associated with it, so we can very easily calculate NDVI, RVI, or a soil adjusted vegetation index, SAVI, etc. This is the mapping component of it, and while it's not as elegant, it does do a good job in terms of being able to look at and map imagery. All right, so where can we get some of this imagery? Probably one of the more widely used applications is what's known as the Google Earth Engine. It's free. It has a ton of satellite-based imagery. So Landsat, for example, is probably going to be, Landsat and Sentinel are going to be two of your better platforms. MODIS is likely much too coarse a resolution for precision agriculture related analyses. But the nice thing about Landsat is that it's the Enhanced Vegetation Index, EVI, and the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index are calculated at 30-meter resolution for you already. It's incredibly useful. There's a ton of information in there, but in many cases it can be too coarse for some applications. Earth Explorer is another great place to look at and find aerial imagery. In fact, Earth Explorer has all of the archived NAPE imagery going back, I think, about 10 to 15 years. You can get EVI and NDVI calculated resolution from Landsat. In fact, much of the Landsat data that's available in Google Earth Engine is also available in Earth Explorer. Again, satellite imagery often tends to be a little bit coarse for some applications. However, you have satellite and aerial-based imagery. And so if we look at the data sets available, again, I clicked on Carrington, North Dakota, you can get imagery down to 1 meter resolution. And they do, under the aerial imagery tab right here, have this imagery from the National Agricultural Imagery Program. In some ways it's limited, so you can put in your search, look for data, and it might come up as there's not any available. It means you're not necessarily going to find data from last week, but it can be extremely helpful to look at past conditions and to just simply get ideas of how things are set up. So it's really hard to talk about data discovery, in 15 minutes, but there's a number of places that we can find useful data for precision agriculture related analysis. Much of our data discovery involves both raster or aerial based imagery, as well as vector or field outlines type data. That's your polygons and your points. The use of UAS certainly offers unparalleled resolution, as well as excellent temporal resolution if you have access to one. And by temporal, I simply mean you can go out and fly it anytime you want. And much of that can be done at limited or no cost if you know where to look. And then finally, just wanted to provide URLs to some of the places that I talked about. This URL right here is to the USDA Geospatial Data Gateway. This URL will take you to the data sets available through Google Earth Engine. And then this is the link to Earth Explorer. These software links down here are to QGIS and Orfeo Toolbox. For those interested, I would certainly encourage you to look into them. And of course, if you have any questions, my email address is on the first slide, and you're welcome to contact me anytime you like. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have regarding this. and also offer insight into how to manipulate and how to deal with some of these data sets. With that said, I'm going to stop here. It's a lot of information, I understand, but please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always here to help. Thanks a lot and have a great day.